I will take some moving around, but you guys are going to get to this stage as you guys can see over here, there's that threaded bolt meeting into that spacer. So then just sort of gently, the weight of the mount, actually, believe it or not, will put a little bit of a force to sort of align it and thread it in. But you guys can get it really tight, but you don't want to get it too tight, remember, because you guys want to be able to pivot this mount. Let me zoom in. You guys want to be able to pivot this mount so you guys can align the top bolts for the rest of the bag to go in. So that's pretty much the secret, I think, for doing this. It's putting the spacer in, making sure it sits flush. If there's any dirt, it won't. Then take the mount with the thread bolt that they provide, the hex bolt that's over here. Kind of thread it in as best you guys can into the spacer over there. And then as you guys kind of twist it around, see, as I'm twisting it around, kind of putting force, and it's kind of getting a lot more tighter. So you guys kind of have to play with it where you get it to the state where it's just tight enough, but you guys are able to kind of move it. Now, according to the manual, it's got to be aligned like that, where the two bolts or the two holes are facing parallel to here, and then this little large notch comes up through, because you got to be able to put the bolts through there. So, and then but that's the quickest way, or sort of the most optimal way of setting this whole setup up, by beginning with the upper mount and then kind of putting everything together and getting it aligned. So that's it for the rears. I got the other side already in. I'm going to run the lines, and I'm going to start working on the front. So I'll show you guys how the rear is going to look assembled and everything in just a minute. And then sort of another trick is lift up the bag, get one of the bolts kind of threaded into the upper mount of the bag, and then once it's sort of semi-threaded in, it's easier that the bag kind of hangs, and it's easier to move around until to get the other bolt sort of threaded, which is kind of what I did. And then it's just as simple as kind of feeding through and then putting some pressure and then tightening it all up. So put one bolt in to make the bag kind of hang, and then once it's kind of set, it's easier to maneuver the bag in order to put the other screw in. I found that also helps a lot as well too, just as we're talking about mounting the rest of the bag to the upper mount. So this is put through, and the whole idea is it gives you the ability to sort of rotate it a little bit, right? So you guys can align it on the lower cup, and then sort of by rotating it through, it tightens it up. It doesn't have to be super tight here. You do want to have that movement. The pressure of the bag expanding will put pressure on the upper mount, so you don't have to worry about the bag coming loose. But basically, you guys want to get to the point where it's just kind of barely moves, but you're able to shift it, because what you got to do with this setup is later align these guys with these little notches over here, right? So you got to be able to move it around. This is pretty much aligned the way I wanted. Just by doing that. So start with the upper mount, put the bag in, thread it, so you have a little bit of movement to put the bolts in, and then you guys can align the lower mount, which will go into here, and there'll be a retainer that will go through there, and then change the shock up. Be careful, run the line, because the fitting's right underneath here. Run the line first, and I might do a video on how I ran the lines in a bit. Maybe I'll show it to you when I start working on the fronts. And but run the line before you put the cup, because the line will have to go through here and kind of protrude over. So this will kind of prevent the line, so it'll go up here, and then I'll run it behind here and behind the bumper over here. So behind the shield, obviously, because there's an exhaust, you want to make sure that the line's out of the way. so it doesn't burst with the heat. But run the line first before you guys mount this. So I'm gonna do that in just a minute and change the shocks up, and the rear should be done. Okay, so as promised, I'm gonna show you guys where I routed the lines on the RC350. So as you guys know, right underneath the lower mount over here, there's a fitting. So I took the line right through here, through the control arm, fed it out here, went around like this, put it behind the shield, not too tight, but just enough, and then went and routed it to the bumper vents into the truck. And for the front line, I went through the vent again, but I went around where the strut is on the wheel well. As you can see from one of my videos on how to route lines, I like to route my lines externally. As you guys can see, the lines coming through here. So it basically arched above the wheel well, behind the wheel well cover, and then it went down here. I used this sort of cover and then ran it behind the cover all the way up through here, behind here, obviously. So remove these and remove this one. It's actually pretty nice on the RC. More the newer Lexuses, they have that. They usually have this sort of a wheel well that goes through behind here, behind the shield. You can tuck it in through there. And then as you guys can see, one zip tied to the fuel lines, I believe, going all the way through. And it's not connected yet, but that will get you all the way to the front wheel well that you can connect up to the ladder lines that it comes with. So a really sort of easy way to route the line around the wheel well and essentially underneath or behind the covers. You can't really see it through here because those are the fuel lines, but it's behind there and it goes all the way to the front. So that's pretty much it for routing the line. Same thing on the opposite side, and makes it nice and safe away from the exhaust. It's also protected by the elements because of the shields, and good to go. So that's it for the lines, the line routing for this car. Let's go and start working on the front. Okay, so here we go. The front, very simple. First, you got to loosen up the upper ball joint. Make sure the spindle drops. Make sure it's supported from underneath, but it's actually not required because the whole assembly will stay on the lower control arm, and then the shaft will hold it together as well. You don't need to remove the sway bar end link. Remove the tie rod. So first remove the upper ball joint, tie rod. Sorry, upper ball joint. So the spindle drops. The tie rod. Removing the tie rod ends will allow you to slide out the fork that the Lexus suspension is on, and then once those are loose, you go up to the top. 3 bolts. This one has adaptive dampness adjustability, so it has like a motor that's on top. I removed that, and 3 bolts that you remove the cover. There's a cover that has the adaptability sensor or adjuster. Basically, it's like EDFC from Teen. Old school technology has been around forever, and this goes on top. So you remove that, and hidden underneath is the actual strut bolts, and that's pretty much it. The whole thing will drop, and you'll be able to slide away the fork with a strut, and bada bing bada boom. A lot easier for the front than for the rear, let me tell you. I'm gonna get the struts and put them in, and here's the fork. I believe it's a 19 mil. You got to reuse this part and put it on the new shock. What I like to do is I like to put a little bit of NTCs in there. Same with the rear strut bolts. Any kind of bolts that you're going to be putting in that you might potentially want to remove if you're changing up the suspension. NTCs is your friend, especially in Canada. So put a dab of NTCs in there. So this doesn't mate with your shock, so it's easier to pull out and tighten it up with a bolt and call it a day. So we're going to do that in just a second. Install the first strut. Okay, so I'm definitely liking the look of this. This thing sits really nice. The rear tucks, the front almost tucks, It looks quite nice. It's on static air right now. What that means is all the lines are connected by shorter valves, and that allows me to inflate it without having the management present, and have it at a movable height or drivable height, and I can move it around if I need to, and whatnot, and play with it, inflate the individual bags, check for leaks, and vice versa. So it looks really good, actually. It slams. I mean, these cars do have a tendency to slam. Most of the all-wheel drive Lexus have a tendency to slam with some work. This suspension is slightly a little bit different compared to my Lexus GS. They've made a little bit more of an improvement. The upper control arms are a little bit slightly different looking. They look like they have a little bit of an angle. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to get an RC350 replacement upper control arm and compare it to the GS300, see how different they are. And I think the lower control arms are a little bit different as well. I think they made them actually go a little bit lower. I'm not sure if they lower the stance a little bit from the factory. I think most cars coming out these days are a little bit lower. But anyway, this looks really, really good. Next stage is going to be running the lines, doing the secondary compressor harness, doing the trunk setup, and there she goes. So the tough part is pretty much done. And stay tuned for more.